Hey guys, good morning. We are in the 21st session of Oracle 12c Core DBA for beginners, and we are still in the non-CDB concepts. Probably there are three other chapters that covers still non-CDB concepts, and then there are three to four chapters which covers CDB concepts. So this is a very lengthier, course than expected, but it will be covering most of the important stuff which is very required. So the reason why it is being very long is we are not skipping anything that is important. So that's why. So coming back to the current session, so we are in the 13th chapter, which covers concepts around backup and recovery. So when I say concepts around backup and recovery, we are not going to perform any backups and recoveries in this chapter. 14th chapter will purely concentrate on performing backups. 15th chapter will purely concentrate on performing recoveries. So before we do the 14th and 15th chapter, it is very important for you to understand what is a backup, what does it mean, what are the different, why the reasons backup should be taken, and what is a recovery, and what happens in the database when the recovery is started. So all of those concepts are very important before we do the exercises. So that is the reason why this chapter purely covers the concepts around backup and recovery. This will be valid. The concepts whatever is we are going to learn now is going to be valid throughout the life of your Oracle Code DBA profile. So this is the basics of backups and recovery, and this particular backups and recovery job is daily activity for the DBA. Either backups or recoveries, or often both, or either recovery, something like this. So these particular jobs or these particular activities are considered as one of the most common daily used activities. So that is the reason why please be a bit cautious in understanding these concepts, and then we will basically we will go ahead in the next chapter probably uh, performing some backups. Okay. And now, before I quickly start, let me actually tell you something which is, um, which is about this session. This particular topic, this particular chapter has got approximately, if I'm not wrong, 13 to 14 topics. Okay. So let us see if we can cover all of them in this session, but I really doubt because I wanted to go in detail of each and every topic. So if we are able to complete this particular chapter in this session, then well and good. We will start the next session on backups. But if it delays, if there is a detailed explanation required at some points, I'll not hesitate to do that, because even if you are learning a small topic, it is important to learn it completely. So that's what I believe in. So let us quickly start with responsibilities. With respect to backups and recoveries, what are the responsibilities of the DBA? Okay. So being the DBA, you are the owner of the database. So you are also responsible to make sure the data is always available, irrespective of any failures that you see in the infrastructure. So what are the different kinds of failures? We are going to anyway see that in the coming topics. But as a DBA, the first and most important job or your responsibility is to maintain that, is to maintain the infra as such you will be able to get back the data of your database at any given point of time. So that means if somebody asks you to get the database as on 3 days back, 14 hours earlier, definitely you should be able to get it. And at the same time, if something happens to the data center, if the complete data center has been you know uh, completely waved off because of some natural calamities, you can call, probably a earthquake, probably a fire accident, probably a something. If the complete data center is cleaned up, even then you should be able to get back your database. So how all these things are done, definitely you will understand when you become a bit of more professional DBA, considering that you are a beginner stage at the moment. Now that is the reason why one important responsibility is to make sure that you get your database back. And then is increase the mean time difference failures. That means if the database has seen a failure today, it should never see a failure again. That is the reason why increase. So never seeing a failure again is very ideal situation which never happens. If the database sees a failure, the time between the last failure to the next failure should be as maximum as possible. Okay, so if a database sees failure today, again if database sees failure after 1 year, that's okay. If it sees failure after 2 years, that is better. If it sees a failure after 3 years, that is much more better. And if it never sees a failure, that is the best one. Okay, so that is the reason one of the responsibilities of the DBA is to increase the mean time difference, mean time between the failures, and then protect the critical components by using redundancy. This is what I said. Whenever your database is having some data, if the complete data center is being crashed, right? The hard disks are all gone. Your backups, if they are on the same hard disk, they are also gone. So that is why DBA responsibility is to maintain a copy of the complete database somewhere in a different data center as well. So this will be a part of your infrastructure management anyway. We call that as disaster recovery setup. So if there is a disaster in one of the areas, you can use the other areas to get the data back and then restore the database and data. That is what we call it as. So you are responsible to protect the data, which is critical data components, by using redundancy. Redundancy is nothing but maintaining multiple copies. And then decrease the mean time to recover. What is decrease the mean time to recover? That means if a database sees failure at 10 o'clock, you should be able to get back the database by 10:01. That is the best. If you are able to, if your database is seeing a failure at 10 o'clock, if you're able to get back your database by 10:15, then that is okay. That means you took 15 minutes of time to recover. And again, if the database is a failure at 10 o'clock, you are getting back the database at 10:30. Okay, that is okay. You are getting back the database by back in 30 minutes. So this time to restore the database whenever you see a failure should be as minimum as possible. So that is the reason why you have to always target to decrease the mean time to recover. That is also the responsibility of the DBA. And then minimize the data loss. So whenever there is a failure, whenever you're getting back to your database back, if there is no data failure, you are the best. If there is at least one row that is missing, then that is not a complete recovery. But whatever I said, the best, that is ideal situation. That means you cannot get back your database, with a full loss protection. You cannot do that. There will be certain data that might be gone, but that certain data that is possible to go off should be as minimum as possible. Okay, so if you are reducing the amount of data loss whenever there is a data failure and getting back to your database, then you are doing the best as a DBA role. So these are the primary responsibilities with respect to the backup and recovery as a DBA that you have to target. So that is well about the responsibilities of the DBA. The same thing I have described here. Okay, so what is mean time between failures, and what is what are the different options available to actually help you to maintain the redundancy of your data. That is nothing but Oracle Data Guard and real application clusters. These are two important profiles or the skills that every DBA have to learn, because without which you will not find most of the production environments running. So all the business environments would basically have real application clusters and Oracle Data Guard configured. And the way that we maintain or decrease the mean time to recover concepts is to best, you actually have to have the best practices of backups and restorations in place. And one of the important, how do you basically minimize the loss of data is to enable, use archive logs mechanism, use flashback technology, and also data guard. These are the available solutions for all these responsibilities as a DBA. Anyway, as we are not going to speak about the advanced topics called Oracle RAC and Data Guard, but we are going to see how archive logs will help you, how flashback will help you to reduce or to protect the components and to maintain or to minimize the loss of data. Okay, So now, as I said, the DBA responsibility is to protect the database from the failures. These are the list of possible failures that you can see for your database. First one is statement level failure. That means, whenever you see an SQL statement being failed, and if there is any loss of data because of that SQL statement, because an SQL statement can also be a delete, right? If you are deleting it, that is to accidentally, then there is a loss of data. If it is accidentally, if it is, required delete, then we don't call it as data loss. But if it is a delete statement which was, not required, but it was done mistakenly or, unknowingly or something like that, then it's a statement failure. You need to get back the data. User process failure, that means whenever there is a data, I mean, if there are set of transactions which are running already, and if user process gets terminated on the server because of some XYZ reason, you should be able to get back the data, before the user process started. And the network failure, if there is a network broken, definitely there might be, that is a cause of failure, and how do you recover back from the network failure is what we should see. And then user error, as I told you, one of the examples in the statement failure is also falls into user error. That means without, unintentionally, if user executes a command and it erases the data, then it's a problem. Instance failure is nothing but if your database memory components goes down directly, we call that as instance failure. And media failure is nothing but your hard disk issues, RAM issues, and CPU issues. Most of the times media refers to hard disk issues. So if there is a hard disk issue, definitely there is a problem with reading the data, right? So, how do we basically overcome with all these failures is what we are going to see now, one after the other. So first one is statement failure. As you can see here, typical problems that might come with the statement failure is attempts to enter an invalid data in the table, that is by the user, and the solution is to work with the users and then help them to correct the data. Most of the times this is not something that we see as a DBA, but still it is a good to know information, okay? Because considering you as a fresher in this profile, you should know this. But whenever you see a problem in the statement, most of the time it is something that has to be taken care by your user who is writing up the code. Next possible problem with the respect to statement is if a user is attempting to perform operations with insufficient privileges. That means a user is trying to select data from the table from a different schema, but he do not have privileges. Then it is us who need to speak. You cannot give the access directly. You need to speak to the business management and check if the access required is valid or not. Only if it is valid, you need to provide the access. Hope you guys know how do we provide an access to an object from what we have discussed in administering users chapter. And then attempts to allocate space that fail. That means if you are a user who is trying to insert some data, but in the table space, that is in the data file, there is no enough space available, then that is also part of the statement failure. Then DBA will step in and will try to check what is the issue, and then he will try to add the space to the data file if it is relevant. But in real time, what happens is managing the spaces in the data files will be proactive. It is not reactive. That means well before a user faces an error because of space, DBA will try to keep the space available in the data file proactively. That is what we do. And logical errors in the applications, there is nothing much that you can do if for the logical errors, because logic is something that you guys have to, or the developer has to write properly. Only then data will be as expected. So we have to get back to the DB developers to get it fixed. Next one is user process failure. As I told you, a user process an abnormal disconnect. That means whenever user is trying to execute a query, but in the meantime user system has gone down. That is an unexpected failure, disconnect, right? Next one is your user session is abnormally terminated. That means consider you are on a web browser, without clicking up the logout, you are just closing up the browser. That is a session termination, right? And a user experiences a program error that terminates the session because of some program or your application code. If it is terminating the session, if it sees a very violent error, then it is also considered as an abnormal shutdown of the session with respect to the database. For all of these typical problems, there is nothing that you can do. automatically Oracle database, what does it do is, if there are any active transactions by the user, it will do a rollback. Okay, as we discussed this rollback concepts already in the SQL course, and also we have discussed the same thing in data concurrency chapter. The same thing happens whenever it sees a user failure. DBS no need to worry about it. Database automatically rolls back to the last committed version of the data. Okay, and then network failure. So if there is a listener issue, yes, DBA has to configure and take care that listener is always available so that users will never see a network broken error message. And if there is any issue with the network interface cards, the one of the best possible solution is to have multiple NIC cards to your server, which you cannot make the decision of. Your infrastructure team should make the decision of. Probably the network team would directly have this enabled for each and every data center. So if one of the NIC cards is going down, automatically there will be a logical remapping to the other NIC cards. Okay, and if there is a network configuration fails, you have to definitely have a backup of connection. So if there is a complete network broken, for example, if you are using an Airtel broadband connection, if that is gone, you should immediately have a different broadband connection in place, probably British Telecom, or you can take any other T-Mobile or something. You can take any of the connections that you can think of, but it is always good to have two network connections from application to database. If one goes down, you can immediately switch to the other, and that is taken care by network team. You don't need to worry about network failures. Only issue that you have to worry about network failures is to regarding the listeners. Okay, and also port numbers. The port numbers on which listeners will listen, those port numbers should be open. And then the user error, as I told you, if user accidentally deletes the data, or he accidentally drops the table, you should be able to roll back the transaction or get back the table which is dropped. All the drop tables are basically in the recycle bin. It is very similar to how Windows or Mac works. If you delete something, it is there in the recycle bin. You can put them back to the same location. Very similarly, for all the tables which are dropped in the Oracle database, there is a recycle bin as well inside the Oracle database. So if a user drops it, if it is in the recycle bin, get it. If it is not there in the recycle bin, that means it is permanently deleted. You have to then get it back from the backup. And if there is if there was any error only at the statement level, that is a delete command or update command, you can perform a rollback transactions with the help of the technologies like flashback. Okay, so flashback is one of the technologies which will help you to get back. First is using undo. Flashback will also use undo data anyway. So because the old image is always there in the undo, right? So that is how user errors can be handled. And the next one is instance failure. That means whenever your instance goes down, all the memory components goes down because of some power outage, or because of hardware failure, or because of failure of one of the critical background processes, or emergency shutdown procedures. So you understand what is a power outage. It is as simple as switching off your system, right? If there is a database which is actively running, and if you switch off your server, what happens? And if there is an hardware issue, probably your completely motherboard is gone, what next? And one of the background processes are gone. That means your SMON background process or PMON background process, log writer background process, all these are mandatory background processes, right? And if these background processes are terminated, what happens to your instance? Instance will see a failure. And then emergency shutdown procedures are nothing but shutdown abort. I hope you remember from the chapter database startup and shutdown options. We have seen one of the shutdown options is shutdown abort. It is as simple as killing up the instance. Now, whenever instance sees all these failures, whenever you are bringing up back your instance after these failures, there will be a recovery mechanism automatically initiated by your instance that is taken care by your SMON background process. So your SMON will automatically start the recovery of your instance if there was any instance failure. Okay, on the left hand side, whatever might be the use case, if those scenarios are faced by your instance, whenever you are bringing back the instance, automatically SMON will perform the recovery of the instance, and then it will open the database. What is the recovery and what is the process of recovery? We are going to discuss that in detail in few minutes. So apart from that, just consider that if there is any instance failure of the database, next time when you bring up the instance, your SMON will perform the recovery in the background. Only after the successful recovery in the background, your database will be opened. Okay, so we will see what is that and how the process of recovery happens anyway in few minutes. Then last one is media failure. As I told, if the disk is gone, if the disk drive is gone, or the disk controller is gone, or the complete deletion and corruption of a data file is happened on the data on the hard disk, what happens is, the only thing is you will be completely dependent on the backup copies that you make, and then from the backup copies you will have to restore the data and then get back to your database. Okay, so that is what is all these failure types as an Oracle DBA you have to face. All right, so now let us go to the next concept called as flashback. Now I think this is one of the let me actually tell you where does this flashback will be helpful. Okay, so flashback is always helpful here in um, user process, no, here, yeah, user error. You can see a rollback transaction and rollback dependent transactions to be rewinded, right? This is when a flashback is always useful. So what is exactly a flashback technology? You need to basically understand. One thing that you guys know already is, if a user is performing a delete or update, he have an option to issue a commit or rollback. So if he want to rewind the transaction, he will issue rollback. If he wants to save the transaction, he will issue commit. But consider a case where user has performed a list of transactions and he has committed, and after commit they identified that the sequence of transactions were flaw transactions. That means they wanted to revert back to the earlier data stage. Now because the data is already committed by the user cannot directly roll back. Now user comes back to the database administrator and he will tell that at so and so timestamp I have performed these transactions on the table. Now all these transactions are the flaw transactions. I wanted to revert them back. Now when you get such issues, one such feature inside the Oracle database that saves the time of the DBA is the flashback. What you can do is, using this flashback technology, you can basically view the past states of the data. You can wind the data back and forth in time. That means you can get back the data and also you can get forward the data as well, until unless those timestamps are always behind the current timestamp. And it will also assist users in error analysis and recovery. As you do this to and fro, okay, back and forth, what happens is, you can let the data to be there in the table and help the user to identify which one is the correct data. And then as user confirms that this is the correct data expected, you can then commit those changes to the database and you can fix the table in that stage. So that is what is possible with the help of the flashback technology. And how are the flashback, what are the different options available in the flashback technology is nothing but this. So to analyze the errors, you can use flashback query, you can use flashback version query, and you can use flashback transaction query. These are the three different ways that a flashback can be used by the users to check the errors. That's it. Only to analyze the errors, these three different options can be used by the users in case if they have flashback, running a flashback option or privilege. But most of the times DBAs will have these privileges enabled. In case if they want to give these privileges to the end users, you need to create a role and assign that to the end user. Alright. Now the next thing is, what are the possible solutions? Once these are the different options available in flashback to analyze the error. Once user analyzes the error and he identifies the error and he asks you back to get back the data as on so and so timestamp, or as on between the transactions, or as on between drop, all of them is possible. So for all of them, you can do it with these options which are available in Flashback. I will quickly tell you what are these options, so that because this is only an introduction part of Flashback. But how do you perform all these Flashback activities is a different job, and then you have to do a lot of activities around it, which we will do it later. But still, I'll tell you, these are the 4 different ways that you can recover the data using the Flashback whenever there is a user error after the analysis. Not every time user might come back to DBA for analysis they might do themselves, but after the analysis, if they're coming back and asking you to restore the table, if it is complete table to a certain timestamp, you use Flashback table option. And if it is a transaction based rollback, you will use Flashback transaction backout. And if the table has been dropped already and the user is asking you to get back the dropped table, the option is Flashback drop. And one such option is in case if the transactions are happened to almost all the tables in the database and they say that all those transactions are flaw, you can completely roll back the database itself to a different timestamp in the past. So that means you are getting back to your database to a past timestamp, complete database. That means all the tables will be rolled back. So that is nothing but the Flashback database. So you guys, believe or not, all these options are very, very easy. You can just type a single command, everything will be taken care. So that means the life of your DBA is going to be very, very smooth. And let us see what is this, how the Flashback, is there any configuration for the Flashback, etc., etc. But conceptually, there is no configuration required to use Flashback. So Flashback is one such feature that is by default available inside your Oracle database. At any given point of time, you can use Flashback, but it purely depends on the data in your undo. That means in case if you want to flashback your database completely, all the transactions in the database should be available in undo, right? For the past 1 hour, for the past 2 hours. That means the Flashback is a technology which is purely dependent on the undo data. So if undo data is available in the undo table space, then you can definitely use Flashback. For example, the transactions happened 3 hours back are not there in the undo table space. That means you cannot flashback your data, or you cannot use the Flashback technology before 3 hours. If your data is available for the past 2 hours in your undo, what you can do is you can use the Flashback to get back your data 10 minutes back. You can get back your data 20 minutes back. You can get back your data 1.5 hours back. You can get back the data 1 hour 50 minutes back as well. But beyond 2 hours, because there is no undo data at all, you cannot use Flashback technology. That is one of the very, very important points you need to remember. Okay, how do we know, what will be the, how many hours of data I will have in the undo? I think we have covered this in undo chapter. But still, let us check that. Okay, so let me log in because I just started up my machine. So let me start up the listener first. Now SQL plus /SS DBA, and then I'll start it up. There is one parameter called as undo retention, which we discussed in the undo table spaces chapter, managing undo. So let us check the same parameter now. So come on, it should be open. So see here, it is taking a lot of time to be opened just because last time in the last session when I basically shut down the server, I did not shut down the database first. I directly closed my instance. So that is the reason why it has taken some time to perform the instance recovery as we just discussed. So coming back to the current topic, that is nothing but your Flashback. So if you just say undo, you can see undo retention is 900 seconds. This particular parameter is in seconds. That means at any given point of time, undo can guarantee that 15 minutes of data will be there in the undo table space, the last 15 minutes of transaction information. It doesn't mean that this is the minimum retention guarantee. That means maximum can be anything. That means it can withhold the same transaction information even two months before also, if the undo table space is not busy. If undo table space is busy, then the guaranteed retention is 15 minutes for sure. But if undo table space is free and if your database is always up and running, your transaction information might stay for days, weeks, and also months. Okay, so whatever is this value, that is the minimum retention guarantee. Maximum retention guarantee is always possible to any extent. It depends on the usage of your undo table space, and that is because your undo management is auto. That is the reason why. And please remember, in case, that is what I used to tell always, in case if you wanted to use a flashback, you know what to what timestamp you need to flashback. Just if the flashback time that you are trying to flashback is beyond the retention, do not consider that data will not be available in undo. Just give a try first. Probably the data must be there in flashback. If it is there in the undo, your flashback will work. In case if it is not there in undo, then you can go with the other options like backup and restore. Okay, backup will be already there, you need to perform the restore. Okay, so whenever you are doing a flashback, even the timestamp that you are going to roll back is beyond the undo retention time frame, try to test it, try it once. If it works, well and good. If it is not, then use restore options. Okay, so the command is directly a flashback. You can just see flashback. Okay, so how, I mean, why can't I basically show you how does it work? Okay, so now let me tell you. I create a table instead. I think select username from db underscore users. I think we have created some users in yeah, while we were working in in the SQL session, right? So let me use the same thing. Connect. I'm sorry. Connect as this user. I think the password should be as simple. Okay, let me reset the password then. I don't remember the password. So alter user test123 identified by. Okay, I think we changed this profile, right? We have used verify function, password verify function. So I think that is the reason. Oracle hash 123. Okay, must contain at least two uppercases. Oh my god. Oracle hash 123. Two special characters. I think we made it as complex as possible. I'm sorry for that. Okay, so at the rate will be basically a problem if, so I'll use another special character, hash dollar. Okay, I'm sorry again, it's a problem with copy paste. Okay, 1 minute. Invalid password. I think I'm using Oracle. Okay, instead I'll say or skill. Okay, so now I wanted to log in. Oh, this one is also part of my password now. Okay, that's fine. Connect test 123, and then I have this password. Okay, because there are special characters, there are some issues now. So what I'll do is I'll connect it like this will work. Cool. Now I'll create a table. Create table test 1 2 3 c1 number, c2 varchar 2 of 2, and I'll insert the data. Insert into test 1 2 3. I'll say 1 comma a. Okay, so, oh, values is missing. Why am I doing this? Values, this one, done, and then again I'll insert another table. Okay, I'll take a simple flashback thing and then that will help you to understand. Now there is a commit. Done. Now because this is commit, the data is available in the table. Now accidentally I dropped the table. Drop table, test 1, 2, 3. Gone. Now as the user has dropped the table, it is gone. Now he might come back to Oracle DBA to use the flashback. So what Oracle DBA does is he will cut back to this one and he will say flashback table test 123 dot test 123 before drop. One minute before missing keyword before drop. Let me get the syntax. So the missing syntax was to before drop. Right? Flashback is completed. See, as simple as that. So now I'm connecting back to my data. I mean, this one, this schema. I should see that table will be available. So where is this? Yeah. Select star from test 1, 2, 3. So it is as simple as that. Just a simple flashback will help you to get back to your table before the drop. Now, because the flashback has been used just 15 minutes, within the 15 minutes of duration after the drop, it worked. Sometimes, if it is after 15 minutes, probably it might not work. Probably. That means you can give a try, and if it is not working, you have to use your backups and archive logs to restore. So that is how your flashback thing works. So before I move any forward, so what I will do is let me actually go. Let me give you the navigation and then let me check. Okay. Okay. So what we will do is in this particular session we will cover uh, complete versus incomplete recovery, and then we will stop because this is going to take some time and there are many other topics also which we will cover in the next session. Okay, so that's the big checkpoint. Okay, so now we have understood what are the different reasons why we need to take the backup, and now as I told you, this is the moment where you need to understand how a instance recovery will happen in the background. As I told you, whenever you are bringing back the system after the instance failure, automatically database performs the recovery, right? That is what I have just said few minutes back. How does it do is what you need to understand. What does it do at the background is what something you need to understand. One of the important background processes which is responsible to perform the recovery of the instance automatically is CKPT. So CKPT, I am sure you are aware of. It is a checkpoint background process. The responsibility of this CKPT background process in the recovery is to update the data file headers with this checkpoint information and update the control files with the checkpoint information and signal DB writer at the full checkpoints. So this is what it does. Okay. So if you check this image, so checkpoint is something that will update the latest checkpoint information in data files, control files, and also it will issue the DB writer about the checkpoints updates to the data files. So for every 3 seconds what happens is the CKPT background process stores the data in the control file about the modified data blocks that DB writer has written from SGA, and this is called as incremental checkpoint. So why is this required? This incremental checkpoint is required for the online redo log files as well to perform the instance recovery in case if there are the SCNs which are not updated to the disk yet, but the transactions are committed in your database buffer cache. I'm sure when we discussed about database buffer cache and DB writer, we said that the data blocks from the database buffer cache are written into the disk asynchronously. That means it doesn't immediately write the data blocks into disk as soon as somebody issues a commit. It does that job whenever it finds the resources free. That means if somebody committed some data, if it is only there in database buffer and if it is not available in disk yet, and at that given moment, if the instance crashes, now that means the data is not available in the disk, right? It is only available in the memory. And how does the committed data is made sure that it is reflected in the disk? That is the process of instance recovery. So if there are some data blocks in that state, whenever instance is coming back, the checkpoint is the one that will do the necessary checks to identify if there are any committed data blocks using the SCN number which are not yet saved in the disk. If those are transactions which are not yet committed, sorry, not yet saved in the disk but committed, it will take the redo information and it will redo the same job before the database opens, so that those data blocks are again available in the database buffer cache, and those data blocks will be saved into the disk in some time. That is what happens with the help of the checkpoint when recovery is happening. Okay, so to ensure that modified data blocks in the memory are returned to the disk regularly so that data is not lost in any case, checkpoint is something that we'll use. It is also used to reduce the time recovery for instance recovery. Only because of checkpoint information with the help of SCN number, your recovery will be very, very fast because the reference is already available. Okay, now log writer and redo log files are something important in this recovery process as well. As I told you, if you in an instant back, if there are any transactions which are committed, data blocks were already there in the buffer but they are not saved into disk yet. Now whenever instance is failed at that moment, memory is completely erased, right? So that means the committed transactions are no more available in memory when the instance is coming back. So the only job that instance can do when it is coming back is to identify that there are transactions which are not saved in the disk yet and then perform the redo operation with the help of information available in redo log files. So at that moment, a log writer will also be very, very busy when the recovery is happening at the background. Okay, so this is something which is again very, very important for you to understand why the reason instance recovery happens, and in the process of this instance recovery, what are the background processes which will actively participate. That is very important. I hope it is very clear now. So what I'll do is, because this is one of the confusing part that most of the DBAs will do, I have something called understanding the instance recovery. In case if you don't understand this, there are phases of instance recovery. I will also discuss the same thing. And in case if you are not clear, I will pause at this topic. You can question me on the recovery concepts. I'll make the concepts clear. Okay. So let me explain this. As I told you, log writer is something that will redo the same job which was done before the instance crash, only for the transactions which are not yet saved in the disk. Okay, so at commit, yes, DB writer, yes, before the clean shutdowns, all of them, log writer will write the buffer cache, dirty buffer into your disk. That's the job of your log writer, you know that anyway. Now how do we understand this recovery process? Because we know what are the responsibilities of the CKPT and also the log writer and the redo log files in the instance recovery. But what are those terminologies which are basically, what are those two primary operations that run in the background? One is roll forward and one is roll backward. What does it mean? Now I will tell you with the help of the small example. Now consider at 10 o'clock you have performed transactions and they are committed, fine. At 10:05 these committed data blocks are not yet saved in the disk. At 10 o'clock 5 minutes your instance is crashed. And in these 10 to 15 transactions, okay, consider we have 15 transactions happened. Okay, so from all these 15 transactions you have committed 10 transactions, you have rolled back 5 transactions. This is at 10 o'clock. So at 10 o'clock there were 15 transactions, out of which 10 transactions are committed, 10 transactions are rolled back. Now at 10:05 nothing yet saved into the disk yet because DB writer works asynchronously. At 10 o'clock 5 minutes, consider your instance is crashed. Now because your instance is crashed, your database buffer is also cleaned up, but in the disk you do not have all the committed transactions in the disk yet, right? Now what happens when the instance comes back next minute is it identifies that there were transactions which are not yet saved into the disk with the help of the SCN number in the data files. And the SCN number in the redo log will be different, SCN number in the data files will be different. Then it identifies that there are some transactions from a particular SCN number that it has to roll forward. So roll forward is nothing but it will perform all the 15 transactions. Okay. Now it performs all the 15 transactions that is available in the redo log files. Now that is what called as roll forward operation. Now roll backward operation is nothing but out of those 15 transactions that are executed, it will roll back only 5 transactions. Now it is equivalent to what happened at 10 o'clock, right? The same thing will happen at 10 o'clock 6 minutes also. So these are the two operations that instance recovery will perform: roll forward and roll backward. Okay, so roll forward is the first action that it does in the rollback, in the instance recovery phase, and then it will perform the rollback for the uncommitted or rolled back transactions so that your data is still the same before the instance crash. This is how you need to understand the instance recovery. And the phases of instance recovery is whenever it performs a startup, the same thing I said, from the redo information it will perform all the transactions are executed. That is what called as roll forward, and all uncommitted committed transactions will happen. Then database will open, and out of the undo only committed transactions will be there in the data file, uncommitted transactions will be rolled back. So that is what it does. See here, so the data files, control files, and then redo log group. If you see here, the SCN number in the control file is latest 143, and the same thing is available in SCN number in redo log group also. This is taken care by CKPT background process, right? And if the data file is not in the latest SCN number, that is 143 is not yet there, then when the instance is coming up, it identifies that this needs a recovery. Then it goes and picks up all the transactions which are between 140 and 143, and it will execute all those transactions with the help of redo. That is called as roll forward. And then database will be opened. And once database is opened, it knows the information about uncommitted transactions with the help of the undo, and it will roll back all the transactions with the help of undo. That's it. This is what called as instance recovery process. You need to understand this, very, very important. And before we close, we will cover up this topic, which is complete versus incomplete recovery. We have spoken about recovery so far. I think I have, I'll pause at this moment in case if you have any questions up to recovery. Please ask me any questions. If not, I can move forward to complete and, difference between complete and incomplete recovery. So the question is, why the SCN number is not updated in the data files for the transactions? The reason is the SCN numbers updating in the data files is asynchronous. That means only when DB writer is writing up the transaction information into your data files, the SCN number is updated in the data files. So this is the reason why, definitely as soon as the SCN number is changed and it is updated in the control file and redo log file, the same SCN number is not available in the data file. It will be available only after the DB writer writes the transaction into the data file. That is the reason always there will be a difference in SCN numbers between the data files, control files, and redo log files, but there will not be any difference between SCN update between control file and redo log file. They both will be in the sync. They both will be updated with the latest SCN number for sure, but always DB writer will be out of sync because of asynchronous action. So with that, we are done with the questions. So let us move to the last topic of this session, that is complete versus incomplete recovery. So when do you call a recovery is complete? That means if you are able to get all the data, okay, even after the instance is crashed, we call it as a complete recovery. That is what it means. You remember that CKPT is a process that will run for every 3 seconds, right? Now, because it is something that happens in every 3 seconds, there is a possibility that the data is in the process of commit and also recover process within those 3 seconds also that your CKPT did not capture. That means data is not captured by CKPT itself because the instance crash happened after 1.5 seconds, and between 1 second to 1.5 seconds there are two committed transactions. So if there are any committed transactions within the CKPT change of SCN number, definitely that data will be missing. We call that as incomplete recovery. Almost all the recoveries that happens inside the database will be incomplete recovery, but you remember that CKPT will change the SCN number for every 3 seconds, even the transactions are, even if transactions are not there, right? So you cannot comment on complete and incomplete recovery, completely or with a very valid reason why, but this is what it means. A complete recovery is something that you do until the time of crash, but still I call it as an incomplete recovery because there is again 3 seconds of gap that your CKPT generates an SCN number, right? So if it is idle, it doesn't generate an SCN number until 3 seconds. But Oracle says that yes, if you are able to get back the data until the last time crash happened, ignoring those 3 seconds, it is called as complete recovery. But in case if the crash happened at 10:05, you are able to get back the data only until 10 o'clock 2 minutes, then that is called as incomplete recovery. That's it, as simple as that. So a complete recovery is getting back your database until the last second or microsecond of crash happened. Now, incomplete recovery is getting back to your database at any different timestamp before that. So it can be 2 minutes before the crash, it can be 10 minutes before the crash, or 1 hour before the crash, or manually, even without the crash, using up the backups, you are restoring the database to 2 hours back. Even that is called as incomplete recovery. That is why you have, this one here. Consider you are restoring it from the backup, and then you are recovering it until the last time crash happened. It is called as complete recovery. If you are crashing up and if you are bringing up your database until this, it is called as incomplete recovery or point in time recovery. So there are two names for the other recoveries, that is point in time recovery and incomplete recovery. That means getting back to your database to a different timestamp before the crash happened. That is what called as point in time recovery. That means whenever you perform a point in time recovery, all the transaction between the crash time and the restore time will be missing. That means a crash happened at 10:05, you are restoring your database only until 10:02. All the transactions between 10:02 and 10:05 are completely gone. That is something that you need to remember. And this is the recovery flow, just for your case. From the backups, you restore the data files, and then you basically took changes from the online redo log files and archive logs, and you have committed, and you basically ran all the roll forward operations. That is committed, uncommitted transactions are updated in the data files, and then your undo is applied after the database is opened, and you perform a roll backward operation. This is what the process of instance recovery, right? The same thing is displayed here. And if you are doing this until the last second the database has been crashed, it is called as complete recovery. Now if it is incomplete recovery, there will be something different. That means you restore the backups only that are necessary, and you only roll forward all the transactions until a specific timestamp. That means whenever you are doing a point in time recovery, you restore from the backup, you do all the roll forward operations until 10:02 only, right? As I told, if the crash happened at 10:05, you only roll forward operations until 10:02, right? So you are limiting the number of transactions to roll forward also. Then what you do, you open the database, and then you perform a roll back. That means rolling back is nothing but removing the uncommitted transactions is nothing but the rollback for using the undo. That is the reason why in the backups, along with the data files, backing up your archive log files, backing up your undo is very, very important. Okay, so undo and archive log files play a very, very vital role. In the roll forward operation, it uses redo log files. In the roll back operations, it uses undo. So these two these two files are also very important as a part of your daily backups. So this is nothing but point in time recovery. So the same thing, whatever I discussed is detailed in the form of a step-by-step process. You can also go through it. I hope then you will understand it much better. Okay, so that's it for this particular session, which is only first. I mean, I was able to cover only first half of this chapter because I don't want to miss the details of each and every topic. If I run through this topic, you will find difficulties later. So that's the reason I went into all these details. So we will move on to the next session with the further topics of this chapter. That will be session number 22. So if you have any questions at this moment, I'll be happy to answer.